I'm David Forsberg. I got in the Navy just at the time that they were no longer requiring that you volunteer to serve.
My name is Paul Wold. I served in the Army from October 21st, 1941 until December 5th, 1945. I was drafted and received the notice from my local draft board on which my father served in Clear Lake, South Dakota. And I was inducted into the service at Fort Snelling, Minnesota.
I'm Vivian Wood, as you probably know, and I was 19 years old when Pearl Harbor was bombed. I lived on a farm in Ohio with my family. I was the oldest of 4 children, and my mother had high blood pressure. And in those days, there wasn't any treatment for it. So she died the next year. My father, I think, was aware of what the problem was, and he remarried in another year. And so I felt that I was free to go. So I joined the Marine Corps.
I'm Preston Welch. I served in the U.S. Marine Corps 1943 to 1945. I saw action at Iwo Jima, was wounded there, spent 7 months in the hospital in San Diego. Remember my time in the Marine Corps with some fond memories.
Walter Oleskowitz. I was in the 36th Infantry Division, World War II. I started off in North Africa by boat, landed in Italy, in Naples. We went through quite a few very, very dangerous missions. One of them was a little town called Middleware. This was somewhere before Christmas of 1944. It was my turn to be on the radio. I had to stay awake, even though I almost couldn't. But anyhow, turns out we got an emergency message to go back, right where we came from. As we left the headquarters, we didn't know it, but in the meantime, the Germans set up a machine gun, and we couldn't get out of that basement without them firing at us. And I remember some of the guys later on were laughing because when I left that basement and ran across that street, I jumped through a window with a radio on my back, and they were wondering how I squeezed through there. So they were always laughing about it every time they saw me after that. But when you're trying to save your life, you're going to do anything.
My name is John Egan. I have lived at Royal Oaks for 4 years. You know, I was in basic training, and they were looking for people intelligent enough to do counterintelligence work, and I fit the bill somehow.
Chief of Naval Operation, Mr. Sigmund Conant, 250-6729, 1946, LeBoy Street, Chicago, Illinois. Navy Unit Commendation awarded to U.S. ANZIL, CVE 57, ex-Coral C.
My name is Mary Anderson, and I'm a resident of Royal Oaks in Sun City, Arizona. I was married to my first husband, Jim, on May of 1943. He went into the service in December of 1943.
Arthur Richard Albrecht, 1943, when I got involved with the military service. That was when I graduated from high school. It was only the military, the Army you joined. It was Army or Navy, or the Marine Corps. You didn't have any other options, such as the Air Force. Later in the service, the Air Force separated from the Army, and I went with the Air Force.
Okay, I'm Steve Hovan, full name Stephen, S-T-P-H-E-N. I guess my World War II service started for my 17th birthday. At that time, I was given the opportunity to either join any of the services, or if I waited till I was drafted, I would have to go to the service that draft board decided I had to go. So I had 3 older brothers, all 3 in the Navy. They all recommend finish high school. So I finished high school, then I joined the Navy. The same month I graduated from high school. Navy took me by train, coal burning train with windows open, to go to Great Lakes, Illinois.
I am Lenore Gill, and when I was in the Navy, my maiden name was Lenore McGill. And I was a WAVE, and I don't know if you know what that stands for, but it stands for Women Accepted for Emergency Volunteer Service. And that bill was signed into effect as the U.S. Navy Reserve was the real name, and that was in July of 1943, or 42, I mean, by President Roosevelt.
My name is Stanley A. Mills, and I was born March 27, 1921, in Yonkers, New York. I went into the Air Force in 1942, and I was in for 3 years. I flew 35 combat missions as a bombardier navigator in Europe. We got hit in one engine, and it pretty well knocked out one engine, so we came back on 3 engines. I was able to get back without any disabilities, except I'm deaf. I'm deaf from the noise. I was in the middle of those 4 engines, and that's how I got deaf. And these hearing aids are paid for by the VA because it's service connected, and it's a good thing because they cost $2,500 a piece.
All right, my name is Earl Cameron. I was born and raised in Vermont. November 26, 1942 was my 18th birthday. And on November the 27th in 1942, I went and signed my voluntary induction papers. I was sworn in the Army on March 1st, 1943. I did my basic and advanced training in Camp Shelby, Mississippi. When my advanced training was over with, I was supposed to go home on a furlough. But a week before that happened, all furloughs were canceled. There's a little humorous story about that. My grandmother was a very religious woman. St. Jude was her patron saint. She had a statue of St. Jude on a shelf in her kitchen. She was very upset with St. Jude because my furlough had been canceled. St. Jude came off on his shelf in her kitchen. She put him in his icebox. She says, now you're going to stay there until Earl's home from the war safe and sound. And that's what happened.
I'm Harold Cleveland, and I was in the Navy. And I've had good experiences and bad experiences. And they didn't do a lot of training because they wanted to get you into the war, as soon as possible. Then I went to New Orleans, and I was in I got in the amphibious force, and that's landing crafts. And I was on a 105-footer. And only about 6 of us on there. Then we went from there to Pier 92 in New York, and that's when I became 21. Went to Jack Dempsey's restaurant and celebrated there and had a good meal and a few beers.
I'm Harry Bonner. When I was 14 years old, the Japanese bombed Pearl Harbor. And so my high school years were spent in the civilian part of the war. You may remember we had gasoline stamps. If you had an A stamp, it was good for 4 gallons a week. The speed limit everywhere was 35 miles an hour. Sugar was rationed, and bacon was available sometimes, particularly if you knew the grocer. Rationing was going on for everything. Neighbor girl went to Dallas to work in an aircraft factory, and since silk was the only hose that women wore, and no silk available now that we were at war with Japan, she came home and painted her legs to look like hose and enlisted me with a black pen to draw a stripe down the back of her leg so it would look like the seam on the hose. I became interested in legs right there.
Since we had no chief petty officer, I got the skipper's gig and would go to the supply ship to get new tubes, new electronic pieces that we needed for the ship. And it was difficult. The first thing I learned is the supply ship would say, well, we only have 50 tubes, and that's what the Navy says we should carry. You can't have any of them. Well, I said, you know, you have them so that poor little ship like ours was could have it when we needed 4 or 5 more. So I learned that if I took the movie, we got movies that we used when we tied up, and if I took the one that we liked best with me, I could say to the person, well, would you give me 5 radio tubes if I gave you a movie? Usually always one. I got a chance then to stop by and have an ice cream or soda or something, which I wouldn't get aboard our ship, and get back on the gig and go back to our ship.
We had the same training as the men had, same basic training. We marched in platoons, and we had physical exercise, and we had the spotless inspections by our commanding officers, who came around to be sure that our rooms were all ship shape and the beds were made just right, and we were just right. So it was a great time, really and truly.
C-128 at the C means your company, 1st Battalion, 28th Marines, that's like saying the 28th Regiment, and the 5th Division. The 5th Division was hit the beach at Iwo Jima, Green Beach designated. Our particular company was given the job of crossing the island at that spot, which was 700 yards across. The other in that battalion were given the job of going up the mountain of Suribachi. We landed on the 19th, and on the 23rd they had the noted flag raising, and there, after that, a few days quiet, and then the opportunity to head to the other end of the island, which we thought we would, after the flag raising, we had done the hardest job. But the heading north on the island was more fortified, more of the enemy there, more prepared for us.
Our division, the 41st, together with the 25th and the 33rd divisions, comprised an eastern assault force. We were destined for Kyushu and the home islands of Japan. This had been scheduled for November 1st. Army intelligence estimated there would be more than 250,000 American killed or wounded on Kyushu Island. On about the 8th or 9th of August, we were told of the atomic bomb having been dropped on Hiroshima. Our thanks forever were to go to our gutsy president, the haberdasher from Kansas City, Missouri, Harry Truman, for his decision to end the war. I'm just grateful for having been serving my country. Thank you.